The first time I realized my grandson had stopped thinking of my house as mine, I was standing on my own front porch in the rain, holding a grocery bag against my chest. The porch light was on. The curtains in my living room were open. I could see the soft yellow glow from the lamp William and I had bought at a flea market 32 years earlier. I could see my grandson, Evan, walking past the window with a phone pressed to his ear. But when I put my key into the lock, it would not turn. I tried again. Slower this time. Nothing. Then Evan saw me through the glass. He did not rush to the door. He did not look surprised. He just stared at me for one long second, ended his call, and came closer. When he opened the door, he kept the chain on. "Grandma?" he said, lowering his voice as if I were the one causing a scene. "You can't just show up here without telling me." I looked at the new silver deadbolt above the old brass handle. I looked at the key I had carried in my purse since the day William and I moved into that house. "Evan," I said, "why doesn't my key work?" He glanced at the lock, then back at me. I had them changed. For safety. For whose safety? His mouth tightened. "Yours. You've been confused lately." Behind him, on my dining room table, I saw a stack of papers. One of them had a county seal in the corner. Another had my name typed across the top. And that was the moment I understood something I had been too willing to ignore. My grandson had not moved into my home because he needed 6 weeks to get back on his feet. He had moved in because he believed, sooner or later, he could make me disappear from it. If you believe no one should lose their home, money, or dignity just because family decides they are too old to fight back, subscribe to Truth and Dignity Stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you do if your own relative changed the locks on your home? My name is Rebecca Clark. I am 68 years old, Avidov, and until that rainy Thursday in October, I believed I had learned the difference between helping family and being used by them. I had not. My husband William and I bought our little brick house in Willow Creek, Ohio, in 1987. It was not grand. It had 3 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, and a backyard just large enough for a vegetable garden and 2 folding chairs under the maple tree. But it was ours. William worked maintenance for the county school district. I spent nearly 30 years as a library assistant at Willow Creek Community Library. We did not have expensive vacations or brand new cars. We repaired what could be repaired. We saved what could be saved. And every month, without fail, we paid our mortgage. When the final payment cleared, William took the stamped statement from the mailbox, stood in our kitchen, and held it up like it was a trophy. "Rebecca," he said, smiling so wide, his eyes disappeared behind his glasses. "Nobody can take this roof away from us now." At the time, I laughed. I wish I could go back and tell him that a paid-off home can still become the target of someone else's hunger. William died 8 years ago after a short illness that took more from him than either of us wanted to admit. In the months afterward, I learned how quiet a home can become. I learned how to cook for one without making too much. I learned that grief does not leave all at once. It settles into the corners of ordinary things. His work boots stayed by the back door for almost a year. His coffee mug remained in the cabinet. And every spring, I planted tomatoes in the raised garden beds because he had loved to complain that mine grew better than his. My daughter, Melissa, lived 40 minutes away with her husband. She had her own family troubles, her own mortgage, her own long work days. We loved each other, but we were not the kind of family who spoke every day. Her son Evan was different. At least, he used to be. When Evan was little, he spent many weekends at our house. William taught him how to sand a piece of wood without rushing it. I taught him how to make grilled cheese without burning the bread. He had a laugh that filled every room, And when he was 12, he told me he was going to buy me a house beside the ocean when he got rich. You can have a blue porch, he promised. I told him I would settle for him calling once in a while. As he got older, the calls came less often. College did not work out. Then there were jobs that never seemed to last. A construction company, a delivery service, a warehouse job, a sales position that sounded impressive until I learned he was earning commission only. Every time something fell apart, Evan had an explanation. His manager did not appreciate him. His coworkers were jealous. The company was cutting corners. The timing was bad. I wanted to believe him because he was my grandson, and because when someone has known you since childhood, it is easy for them to remind you of the version of themselves you still want to see. That was why. When Evan called me one Tuesday afternoon in April, I answered before the second ring. "Grandma," he said, and I immediately heard something shaky in his voice. "Can I ask you something without you getting mad?" My heart softened before I even knew what he wanted. "What happened?" "I lost my job." He said it quickly, as if the words had been building pressure inside him. I sat down at my kitchen table. "Oh, Evan. They cut people. I wasn't the only one. But my lease is up next month, and I don't have enough saved to renew it. I just need a little time. 6 weeks. Maybe. I can sleep on the couch. I'll help around the house. I'll be out before you know it." There are moments in life when you make a decision because it seems kind, and only later do you understand that kindness without boundaries can become an invitation. I thought of him as a boy in my backyard, chasing fireflies with William. I thought of the way he had sounded when he said he had nowhere to go. So I said yes. 6 weeks. I told him. And we'll write it down, just so there's no confusion. He laughed softly. "Grandma, you don't have to do all that." "Yes," I said. "I do." At first, he was grateful. He arrived with 2 duffel bags, a plastic storage bin, and a gray sedan that had dents along both doors. He hugged me tightly in the driveway. "You're saving me," he said. "I'm giving you a place to land." I corrected. "Saving yourself is the part you have to do." For the first few days, Evan was almost exactly the guest I had hoped he would be. He took out the trash. He mowed the lawn. He fixed the loose hinge on the pantry door that William had meant to replace before he got sick. He called me Grandma in that warm, familiar way. When neighbors stopped by, he smiled and shook their hands. "I'm just staying with her temporarily," he told them, "helping out while I look for work." I was proud of him for saying it. I did not notice that he kept repeating the word helping. At the end of the first month, he told me he had an interview. At the end of the second month, he told me the company had chosen someone with more experience. At the end of the third month, he said he was doing freelance work online and waiting for a payment to come through. By then, his 2 duffel bags had become boxes in my spare room. His plastic bin had become a television stand. His clothes were in my laundry room. His food filled half the refrigerator. I reminded him of our agreement one evening while I was washing dishes. "Evan, it has been longer than 6 weeks." He leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone. "I know. I'm working on it." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm working on it." His tone was flat, not angry exactly, just impatient. I dried my hands on a dish towel. "You need to start making a plan." "I have a plan." "Then I would like to hear it." He looked up at me with a tired little smile, the kind that suggested I was asking too much. "Grandma, I'm not trying to live here forever." "No one said you were. But you keep bringing it up." "Because this is my home." For a moment, something cold moved across his face. Then it was gone. "I know that," he said. You don't have to act like I'm taking advantage of you." That sentence stayed with me after he went upstairs. Not because it was loud. He did not yell. But because I had not accused him of anything. He had answered a question I had not yet asked. The small changes began after that. At first, they were easy to explain away. A letter from my insurance company that I never received. A pharmacy call asking why I had not picked up a refill, even though I had never asked them to call me. A neighbor, Mrs. Dorsey, mentioning that Evan had told her I had been forgetful since William passed. He said you get mixed up with bills sometimes. She told me one morning as we stood by our mailboxes. I stared at her. Did he say that? She looked embarrassed. He said he was worried about you. I assumed he was just being protective. I came back inside and found Evan sitting on my couch with his laptop open. "Why are you telling people I'm forgetful?" I asked. He did not look up right away. "I didn't say you were forgetful." "Mrs. Dorsey says you did." He sighed, closing the laptop. "I said sometimes you get overwhelmed." "Which is true. You called me last month because you thought your utility bill was wrong." "The bill was wrong. They charged me twice." "Okay," he said, holding up his hands. "Then I shouldn't have said anything. But you're taking this personally." I felt my cheeks grow warm. "My health is personal." "I know. I'm sorry." He said it quickly. Too quickly. Then he added, "I'm only trying to make sure people know you have someone looking out for you." That should have comforted me. Instead, it made my stomach knot. 2 weeks later, I noticed my mail was arriving later than usual. I had always been careful about mail. William used to joke that I could hear the postal truck from 3 blocks away. Every afternoon, I walked to the box at the end of my driveway, gathered my letters, and sorted them at the kitchen table. But one Monday, there was nothing in the box. Tuesday, nothing again. On Wednesday, I found a grocery store coupon, an electric bill, and a birthday card from Melissa that had been opened at the corner. I held the envelope up. "Did you open this?" I asked Evan. He looked at it and shrugged. It was probably torn in the mailbox. The card inside was loose. "Grandma, I don't know." It was such a small lie that I almost let it go. But later that night, I saw him carrying a stack of envelopes from the hallway toward his room. When I asked what they were, he said they were junk mail. I wanted to believe him. I hated that I wanted to believe him. The real warning came from a woman named Carla Benton, who worked at the county treasurer's office. I knew Carla slightly from my library days. Her children had come to story hour when they were small. She was not a close friend, but she knew me well enough to recognize my voice. She called my landline on a Friday afternoon. "Mrs. Clark," she said carefully, "I hope I'm not bothering you. I'm trying to confirm an address." "What address?" She paused. "The forwarding address we have on file for you?" I looked around my kitchen. "What forwarding address?" Carla read it to me. It was a post office box across town. For a few seconds, I could not speak. I never changed my address. I finally said, "Well," Carla replied, lowering her voice, "we received a request last month. It included your name, your property parcel number, and what appeared to be your signature." My hands began to shake. "Can you send me a copy? I can tell you how to request one." "But Mrs. Clark." "There is another reason I called." The kitchen seemed to grow quieter. "What is it?" She took a breath. A tax notice was returned from that post office box marked undeliverable. "It concerns an inquiry made against your property." "What kind of inquiry?" "I'm not allowed to interpret private financial documents," she said, "but I can tell you the paperwork references a recorded lender search." You may want to speak with the recorder's office right away." I thanked her, though I could barely hear my own voice. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table for nearly 20 minutes without moving. Then I opened the drawer where William kept important papers. The deed was there. The original mortgage release was there. Our wills were there. And beneath them, wrapped in a faded blue folder, was a note in William's handwriting. "Rebecca, if anyone ever pressures you about this house, call a lawyer before you call family." I had read it before, years ago, when we were updating our wills. Back then, I thought it was just William being cautious. But William had known people. He had known how quickly love could be used as leverage when money, property, or desperation entered the room. That evening, I did not confront Evan. Not yet. Instead, I took the blue folder into my bedroom and locked it inside the old cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Then I called a local attorney, whose name Carla had given me. Her name was Denise Harper. When I explained what had happened, she did not sound shocked. She sounded focused. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "tomorrow morning, I want you to go to the recorder's office and request every document filed against your property during the last 6 months. Do not sign anything your grandson gives you. Do not discuss your concerns with him until you know what has been filed." "Do you think he has done something?" "I think someone has tried to create the appearance that you are not managing your own affairs," she said. "And I think we need facts before we give them time to hide anything." The next morning, Evan left early. He told me he was meeting someone about a job. I watched his gray sedan disappear down the street. Then I put on my navy coat, took my driver's license, my deed, and William's blue folder, and drove to the county offices. The clerk at the recorder's window was kind but businesslike. She pulled up my property record, typed for a moment, then frowned at her screen. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "there are several recent searches attached to this parcel." "Can I see them?" "Yes." She printed the pages one at a time. The first was a title inquiry. The second was an online valuation request. The third was a notice connected to something called a home equity loan application. My mouth went dry. Then the clerk printed one more page and slid it toward me. At the top, in black letters, was the name of a lending company I had never heard of. Below it was an application number. And below that was a line that made my entire body go cold. Primary residence occupied by applicant Rebecca Clark. Co-applicant Evan Clark. I stared at the page until the words blurred. The clerk pointed to the final section. "Mom," she said quietly. "There is also a note stating the applicant may require assisted living placement within the next 90 days. I looked up at her. "What does that mean?" The clerk's expression changed. Not enough to break her professional calm, but enough for me to understand she knew exactly why I was afraid. "It means," she said, "someone was preparing a story about where you would be after they borrowed against your house." And suddenly, I understood why Evan had been telling the neighbors I was confused. Why my mail had begun disappearing. Why he kept asking whether I had considered downsizing. Why he had started calling my home his place whenever he was on the phone. I folded the papers carefully and placed them inside William's blue folder. Then I looked at the clerk and said the first truly firm thing I had said in months. "I am not going anywhere." Outside, the autumn wind cut across the courthouse parking lot. I stood beside my car, gripping the folder against my chest, and watched leaves spin across the pavement. For the first time, I did not feel like a frightened grandmother trying to understand her grandson's mistakes. I felt like the owner of a home someone was trying to steal. And I knew Evan had no idea that I had just found the first piece of proof. I drove straight from the courthouse to Denise Harper's office, with the folder on the passenger seat beside me. I kept one hand resting on it at every red light. It may sound foolish, but I was afraid to let it out of reach. Those papers were not just copies from the recorder's office. They were proof that something had been happening around me while I was still making coffee in my own kitchen, folding my own laundry, and telling myself my grandson was simply struggling. Denise's office was on the second floor of an old brick building near the town square. There were no dramatic signs outside. No glass walls. No polished marble floors. Just a brass plaque with her name, a narrow staircase, and the faint smell of paper and dust when I stepped inside. Her receptionist led me into a small conference room. Denise Harper stood when I entered. She was in her early 50s, with dark hair pulled back neatly and reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She shook my hand firmly. "Mrs. Clark," she said, "I'm glad you came in person. I brought everything I have." "That's exactly what I hoped you would do." I laid the papers across the table. For the next 40 minutes, Denise read in silence. She did not make dramatic faces. She did not gasp. Every few minutes, she wrote something in a yellow legal pad. Finally, she looked up. "The good news," she said, "is that I do not see a completed lien recorded against your home." I let out a breath. I had not realized I was holding. "The bad news? The application is far enough along that we need to move quickly. Whoever submitted this had access to information that a casual stranger would not have." She tapped the title inquiry. "Your parcel number. Your full legal name. Your date of birth. The estimated value of the property." They also had enough personal information to submit a home equity application. "My grandson lives with me," I said. "I understand. I never gave him permission." "I believe you." Her voice was calm, but there was no softness in it now. "Mrs. Clark, I want to be very precise. A lender cannot lawfully use your home as collateral without your verified involvement. But people who intend to commit fraud often create paperwork first and hope the real owner never notices until money has moved." I stared at the word fraud written in her notes. It looked too harsh, too final. "Could Evan have done this without knowing?" I asked. Denise did not answer immediately. "Has anyone else had access to your mail? Your documents? Your phone? Or your computer?" "Evan has access to the house." "Has he ever asked you to sign something?" "Not yet." "Has he ever asked you for a copy of your driver's license, your social security number, a bank statement?" I thought back. 3 months earlier, Evan had told me he was applying for an apartment and needed someone to co-sign. I had refused to co-sign because I was already worried about his debts. But he had asked if he could use my printer. When I came into the living room, he had a stack of papers beside him. "I only need proof your family," he had said. I had been distracted by a call from Melissa. I had not looked closely at what he copied. Then there was the day he offered to help me set up a new online account for my electric bill. Then the day he said my health insurance company needed a clearer image of my identification card. I closed my eyes. "Oh, no." Denise watched me carefully. "Tell me." I thought he was helping me. "That is often how this begins," she said quietly. "The person creating the problem presents themselves as the solution." Her words landed heavily between us. I had spent 6 months telling myself Evan was a young man who needed patience. Denise had known me less than an hour, and she had already seen the pattern I had refused to name. She picked up the application summary again. "There is a company listed here. We need to contact its fraud department today. We also need to put them on notice that you did not authorize this loan and that any signature or statement claiming otherwise is disputed." "Can they stop it?" "They can pause the file while they investigate. But we need to give them a clear statement from you, and we need to protect your property record." "What does that mean?" "It means we file an affidavit with the county stating that you are the sole owner of the home and that you have not authorized any loan, transfer, power of attorney, or change of residence. It will not solve everything by itself, but it creates a record, and it makes it harder for anyone to pretend you willingly disappeared. The phrase made my throat tighten. Pretend you willingly disappeared. That was what Evan had been building. Not just a loan application. A version of me that could be ignored. A woman who was confused. A woman who had moved into care. A woman whose grandson had taken over because she could no longer manage her own life. Denise called the lender while I sat across from her. She placed the call on speakerphone after introducing herself as my attorney. We were transferred twice before a woman named Marisol joined the line from the company's fraud review department. Denise spoke in clear, careful sentences. My client, Rebecca Clark, is present with me. She is the record owner of the property, identified in application number 7419, EC. She disputes the application in its entirety. She has not authorized a loan, a power of attorney, a forwarding address, or any representation that she is entering assisted living. There was a long pause on the line. Then Marisol said, Mrs. Harper, I need to verify a few details. The application indicates that Mrs. Clark requested that communications be sent through a family representative because of declining cognitive capacity. My hands clenched in my lap. Denise looked at me, then back toward the phone. My client is answering questions independently. She is sitting beside me. Please note that any statement of diminished capacity is false and disputed. Marisol's voice changed. It became more formal. I understand. I am placing an immediate hold on the file pending review. Was money dispersed? Denise asked. Not at this stage. The file was conditionally approved, but funding requires additional verification. I closed my eyes. Thank God. Not relief exactly. I was not ready to feel relieved. But at least my house had not yet been tied to a debt I never agreed to carry. Denise continued. Can you provide the documents used to open the file? I can provide them to your office after receiving a written request from Mrs. Clark and verification of representation. Please preserve all records, Denise said. Applications, uploads, call recordings, identification document, emails, electronic signatures, and communications with any applicant or representative. Yes, ma'am. When the call ended, Denise leaned back in her chair. You did the right thing by coming in before confronting him. I looked down at my hands. I feel like I should have known. Why? Because the signs were there. The signs were confusing because they were designed to be confusing. She said, Do not punish yourself for trusting someone you raised with love. I wanted to believe her. But the truth was, I had not raised Evan alone. Melissa had. I had simply been there through every hard season. I had filled in gaps. I had bought school shoes when money was short. I had helped with textbooks. I had listened when he was heartbroken or angry or ashamed. Maybe that was why the betrayal felt so personal. He had not chosen a stranger's home. He had chosen the one place where he knew he would be welcomed. Denise asked if I had somewhere safe to store my original documents. I have a bank box. I said, Good. Put the deed, your will, your financial records, your identification, and any passwords or recovery codes there. Today, do not leave them in the house. The house is still mine. Yes, she said gently, and we are going to keep it that way. But until we understand how much access Evan has created for himself, we do not give him another opportunity. Before I left, Denise printed a list of steps for me. Call the post office and report the unauthorized forwarding request. Change every password connected to my bank, insurance, utilities, and email. Ask the county recorder for certified copies of the documents. Do not sign anything. Do not tell Evan about the investigation. And if he became threatening, called me confused, or tried to take my phone or keys, call the police. That last instruction embarrassed me more than it should have. I had never called the police on anyone in my family. The idea of it felt like admitting something had already broken beyond repair. When I returned home, Evan's car was in the driveway. He was sitting at my kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee waiting. For a second, the sight nearly undid me. That was how normal it looked. My grandson in my kitchen. My blue and white sugar bowl between us. The clock William had repaired ticking above the doorway. A home that had held birthdays, Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, and grief. Evan smiled when I came in. There you are. I was wondering where you went. I had errands. County errands? I stopped. He tried to make it sound casual, but his eyes had sharpened. What makes you say that? I saw your car by the courthouse when I was driving through town. He was lying. His car had been in the driveway when I left the courthouse. I had noticed it, but I did not challenge him. Carla from the treasurer's office called. I said. The smile disappeared from his face. What did she want? She said there was a forwarding address attached to my records. Evan looked down at his coffee. Then he sighed. Okay. I was going to explain that. Please do. He sat back in the chair, rubbing both hands over his face as if I had placed a burden on him. I set up a P.O. box because your mail has been getting mixed up. I thought it would be easier if I could organize things for you. You changed my address without asking. I was trying to make sure important things didn't get lost. Where are my letters? Evan? They're safe. Where? His jaw tightened. At the box. Give me the key. He looked at me for a long moment. Grandma, you don't need to worry about all this. My heart went strangely still. I did not ask whether I needed to worry. I asked for the key. He stood from the table. You're getting worked up over nothing. Where's the key? I'll get it later. No, I said. You will get it now. The silence in that kitchen was different from any silence we had ever shared. It did not feel like a family disagreement. It felt like a line on the floor. Evan's face hardened. I'm doing my best here. Your best would have been asking me. You always make everything difficult. I had heard that sentence before from people who wanted something from me. It was what they said when a polite no was no longer enough. He grabbed his car keys from the counter. Fine. I'll get the mail. I watched him leave. Then I locked the door behind him. Not because I believed one locked door could solve what it, but because for the first time, I understood I had to stop treating access as love. While Evan was gone, I called the post office. The supervisor confirmed that a forwarding request had been submitted online using my information. Because I was the named customer, she helped me cancel it and flagged my address for in-person verification. Then I called Melissa. I stared at her number for a long time before pressing it. When she answered, she sounded tired. Mom, is everything okay? No, I said. I need you to listen before you say anything. That got her attention. I told her about the mail, the county notice, the loan application, the claim that I was moving into assisted living. I kept my voice steady, even when it hurt. Melissa was quiet. Too quiet. Finally, she said, Mom, Evan has been under a lot of pressure. I gripped the edge of the counter. That is not an answer. I know. I'm not saying it's okay. Did you know he was applying for a loan against my house? No. Did you know he changed my mailing address? No. Did you know he was telling people I was confused? She did not answer. A small part of me had already known. Melissa, I whispered. He told me you were having trouble with bills, she said. He said he was helping you? I thought he meant you had asked him. You never called me. I should have. Yes, I said. You should have. She began to cry softly. I loved my daughter. I did. But I had learned something painful that day. A person does not have to participate in a lie to help it grow. Sometimes, all they have to do is choose the version that asks the least of them. I want you to come over, I said. Not to argue. Not to defend him. I want you to see the documents. I'll come tonight. Come alone. When Evan returned, he had the P.O. box key in his hand and a cardboard mail tray under his arm. I told you, he said. Nothing is missing. He placed the tray on the table. It was filled with envelopes. Some were open. Some were not. There were bank notices, insurance letters, utility bills, and an envelope from the county recorder's office with a tear along the flap. I picked it up. Evan moved quickly. Wait. That one is just paperwork. I looked at him. Step back. His hand fell to his side. I opened the envelope. Inside was a notice dated 3 weeks earlier. It stated that the lender had requested property tax verification as part of a pending collateral review. 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, Evan had known the loan application was moving forward. For 3 weeks, he had hidden the letters that could have warned me. I held the paper so tightly it crinkled. Why did you keep this from me? His expression shifted from anger to something almost pleading. Because you don't understand how serious things are for me. What things? He looked away. I owe money. How much? It doesn't matter. It matters if you put my house in the middle of it. I didn't put your house in the middle of it. The lender says you did. He stared at the floor. Then he said the words that changed everything. I was going to make the payments. I felt the room tilt slightly around me. You applied for a loan using my home. I needed a chance. You used my name? I needed a chance. Grandma! His voice rose so suddenly that I stepped back. He saw it. He saw the fear cross my face. For a moment, he looked ashamed. Then the shame became anger again. You have a whole house. No mortgage. Savings. You don't need all of it. I could barely breathe. My husband and I worked our whole lives for this house. And I'm your family. Yes? I said, tears filling my eyes. That is why this hurts. He gave a bitter laugh. You act like I stole something. You tried to. I was trying to keep us from losing everything. Us? He did not answer. The front door opened behind us. Melissa stood in the entryway, pale and breathless. She had heard enough. Evan, she said. He turned toward her. For the first time since he moved in, he looked like the little boy I remembered. Not because he was innocent, but because he looked frightened of being caught. Mom? It's not what she thinks. Melissa looked at the papers spread across my kitchen table. Then she looked at me. What did you do? She asked him. Evan's voice dropped. I was going to fix it. With her house? Melissa said. It was temporary. That word again. Temporary. 6 weeks. A forwarding address. Aloan. A future where I was supposedly tucked away in assisted living while he remained inside the home. William and I had paid for with every careful year of our marriage. Melissa turned to me, crying now. Mom, I'm so sorry. I wanted to comfort her. That was my first instinct. It had always been my first instinct. But I did not. Not yet. I have an attorney. I said. And the loan application is under review? Evan's eyes snapped toward me. You called a lawyer? Yes. You didn't have to do that. I did. You're really going to ruin my life over paperwork? I looked at him, and something inside me became clear. No, Evan. You made choices. The paperwork is simply where those choices can be seen. He grabbed his jacket from the chair. I need air. You need to leave, I said. He froze. What? You need to find another place to stay tonight. Grandma. Kumeon. No. You can't throw me out. I can ask you to leave my home. You don't even know what you're doing. There it was again. The same line he had been planting in the neighborhood, in the loan file, perhaps even in his own mind. You don't know what you're doing. I looked him directly in the eyes. I know exactly what I am doing. He walked out without another word. Melissa followed him to the driveway, calling his name. I stayed in the kitchen, staring at the open mail tray. A few minutes later, she returned alone. He drove away, she said. I nodded. Then she sat down across from me at the table where Evan had been drinking coffee less than an hour before. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, Melissa reached for my hand. I should have listened to you more. Yes, I said again. It was not cruel. It was simply true. That night, I slept in my own bedroom, with the blue folder tucked beneath my pillow and my phone on the nightstand. Every unfamiliar sound woke me. Around 2 a.m, I heard a car slow outside. I stood at the window but did not pull back the curtain. The car drove away. At 8 the next morning, Denise called. The lender has sent preliminary copies of the file, she said. Mrs. Clark, there is something you need to see. I drove to her office again. This time, she did not make me wait in the conference room. She led me straight inside, where several pages were laid out across her desk. One was a copy of my driver's license. Another was a blurry photograph of me sitting on my porch from the previous summer, smiling at something out of frame. A third was a statement that claimed I had appointed Evan as my limited financial representative because I was preparing to transition into residential care. I read every word. Then Denise handed me the final document. It was a power of attorney. My name was signed at the bottom, but it was not my signature. The letters were too stiff. The R in Rebecca had a sharp upward line that I had never made, and next to it was the stamp of a notary I did not recognize. Denise, I said, barely above a whisper, I never signed this. I know. How? She turned the document over and pointed to the notary information. The notary commission listed here expired 11 months ago. I looked at her. And that is not all, she said. She slid a printed email across the desk. It was from the lender's fraud investigator. The electronic submission had been uploaded from an internet connection associated with my home address. Not Evan's phone. Not a coffee shop. Not some office across town. My home. My hands began to shake again. Denise placed her hand over the papers to stop them from sliding. Rebecca, she said, the lender has frozen the application, but the closing appointment was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Tomorrow? Yes. What happens at the closing? They were planning to finalize the loan documents. And according to this file, Evan had arranged for someone to bring you there. My mind returned to the rainy porch. The new lock. The chain on the door. All at once, I understood why Evan had not wanted me asking questions. Why he had been getting impatient. Why he had started telling people I was confused. The plan had a deadline. And now that I had found the papers, I knew the most dangerous part was not behind me. It was still waiting at my front door. The next morning, I did not go home first. That was one of the hardest decisions I had ever made. Every part of me wanted to drive back to my house, unlock the front door, stand in my kitchen, and prove to myself that nothing had changed. I wanted to make coffee in William's old percolator. I wanted to water the fern by the window. I wanted to see the marks on the hallway wall, where Evan's height had been measured when he was 8 years old. But Denise had told me not to be alone with him. So, I went to her office. By 9 o'clock, she had sent a formal notice to the lender, a written dispute to the county recorder, and a request to the notary commission office to verify the stamp on the forged power of attorney. Then she called the Willow Creek Police Department's non-emergency line. "I want to be clear," she told me before dialing. "We are not asking the police to decide a property dispute. We are reporting suspected identity fraud, intercepted mail, and an attempt to obtain a loan using your home." I nodded. Even then, saying those words aloud felt like I was speaking about somebody else's family. A detective named Marcus Bell met us at Denise's office that afternoon. He was a broad-shouldered man in his 40s with a patient voice and a small notebook he kept open on his knee. He listened while I explained everything from the 6-week agreement to the post office box, the assisted living statement, and the loan application. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he asked, "Mrs. Clark, did you ever give Evan Clark permission to use your name or property to apply for financing?" "No." "Did you sign the power of attorney?" "No." "Did you tell anyone you planned to move into assisted living?" "No." "Have you ever been declared unable to manage your own affairs?" "No." He made several notes. Then he asked, "Do you have the original documents showing you own the house?" "Yes." "Do you have the envelope and mail that was withheld?" "Yes." "Did your attorney preserve the lender records?" "Yes." He looked at Denise, who nodded. "That gives us a place to start," Detective Bell said. "We'll need to verify the documents and determine who submitted them. I can't promise how quickly an investigation moves, but I can tell you this. You did the right thing by documenting before money changed hands." I looked down at my folded hands. I should have stopped him earlier. "No," Detective Bell said. "You stopped it when you had proof." There was no pity in his voice. For some reason, that mattered to me. He did not talk to me as if I were frail or foolish. He did not call me confused. He did not suggest that family problems should remain private at all costs. He treated me as the person whose name had been used without permission, the person whose home was at risk, the person who had the right to be heard. After Detective Bell left, Denise received a call from the notary commission office. The notary stamp on the power of attorney belonged to a real person, but that notary had retired the previous year. Her commission had expired exactly as Denise suspected. More importantly, the retired notary had never met me, never witnessed my signature, and had never worked with Evan. The stamp had been copied. Denise closed her eyes for a moment after the call ended. "That is significant," she said. "Significant enough to stop the loan?" The lender already froze it. This helps establish that the document was not simply misunderstood. It appears fabricated. The word fabricated made the room colder. I imagined Evan sitting in my living room with my driver's license, my bills, my mail, and a picture of me from my porch. I imagined him building a false version of my life, one document at a time. A woman ready for assisted living. A grandmother too disorganized to open her own mail. A homeowner who had willingly handed over power to her grandson. And all the while, I had been washing his clothes and asking whether he needed more time. That evening, I stayed at Melissa's house. It was not because I was afraid of my own home. I want to be clear about that. It was because Denise advised me to give Evan no opportunity to claim there had been a confrontation or confusion. She was preparing an emergency filing that would ask the court to prevent him from accessing my financial records, representing himself as my agent, or interfering with my entry into my home. Melissa made up the guest room for me. The room had once belonged to Evan. His old basketball trophy was still on a shelf. A faded poster of a guitar player hung crookedly above the desk. For a long time, I stood in the doorway looking at the room where he had slept as a teenager. Melissa came up beside me. "I keep thinking I missed something," she said. "You did." She nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. "I know." I turned toward her. "That does not mean you are beyond repair. But it does mean you have to stop protecting him from the truth." She covered her mouth with her hand. "I thought if I pushed him too hard, he would cut me off. And so you let him decide what was normal." That was hard to say. It was hard because I knew she had spent years trying to keep Evan close. After his father left, Melissa had worked extra shifts, moved apartments twice, and said yes to things she should have said no to because she was afraid of losing the only child she had. I understood that kind of fear, but understanding was no longer enough. "I love him," she whispered. "So do I. What if this ruins his life?" I looked at the old trophy in the room. "What ruins a life is not being held accountable," I said. "What ruins a life is learning that love will clean up every mess you make, even when you hurt the people who gave it to you." The next morning, Denise called before breakfast. She had obtained a temporary court order. It did not decide every issue. It was not a final judgment, but it directed Evan not to impersonate me, not to communicate with the lender or county offices on my behalf, and not to interfere with my access to my own home. The order also required him to surrender any keys, mail, financial records, copies of my identification, and documents connected to the loan application. "Will he leave?" I asked. "If he refuses, we will take the next legal steps," Denise said. "But for today, a deputy can accompany you while you retrieve access to the house." My stomach turned. The thought of arriving at my own front door with law enforcement felt humiliating. Then I remembered Evan's voice through the chain. "You can't just show up here without telling me." I dressed carefully that morning. I wore my navy slacks, a cream blouse, and the small gold pendant William had given me on our 25th anniversary. I did not want to look frightened. I did not want to look like someone who needed to be rescued from her own life. I wanted to look like Rebecca Clark, the woman whose name was on the deed, the woman who had every right to cross her own threshold. Detective Bell met us in the driveway with a uniformed deputy. Denise stood beside me, holding a folder containing the court order. Evan's gray sedan was parked near the garage. The curtains were closed. For a moment, none of us moved. Then the deputy knocked. "Evan Clark," he called. "Please come to the door." No answer. He knocked again. A minute later, Evan opened the door. The chain was on. His face changed when he saw the deputy and Detective Bell. Then he saw me. "Grandma," he said. "What is this?" Denise stepped forward and held up the order. "This is a temporary order issued this morning," she said. "You are directed to stop representing yourself as Mrs. Clark's agent and to return all materials belonging to her." Evan looked from the papers to me. "You got a court order against me?" "I got help protecting my home," I said. His face went red. "You're making me look like a criminal." Detective Bell spoke calmly. "Mr. Clark, there is an active investigation. We need you to provide the materials identified in the order." "I didn't forge anything." "Then this will be an opportunity to explain the documents," Bell said. Evan looked at Melissa, who had come with me but stood several steps behind. "Mom, are you really letting them do this?" Melissa was crying, but she did not move toward him. "I'm not letting them do anything," she said. "You did this?" For a second, I saw rage flash across his face. Then he shut the door. The chain slid free. He opened it again. "Fine," he said. "Come in." The house looked almost normal. That was the terrible thing about it. My couch was still where it belonged. My framed wedding photograph still hung over the mantel. The bowl of wooden apples William had carved was still on the coffee table. But my home no longer felt innocent. I noticed things I had not noticed before. A folder on the side table beside Evan's laptop. My desk drawer slightly open. A small stack of mail under a newspaper. The deputy remained near the entryway while Detective Bell and Denise went through the order with Evan. I walked toward the kitchen. Then I stopped. The lock above the front door was new. A silver deadbolt. The same deadbolt I would later stand outside in the rain. Unable to open. Evan must have seen me looking at it. I changed it because I didn't know who had keys. He said. You knew who had keys? I replied. I did. He looked away. The folder on the side table contained copies of my bank statements, old tax returns, and a handwritten page listing my monthly pension payment, my savings account balance, and the approximate value of my house. At the bottom, Evan had written a number. 186美元. Ling ling ling. It was the amount requested in the home equity loan application. Beside it were 3 words. Pay off everything. Detective Bell came to stand beside me. May I take photographs of these? He asked. Yes. Evan rushed forward. That's private. It is Mrs. Clark's private information, Detective Bell said. And it is relevant to the documents under review. Evan stopped. I watched Detective Bell photograph the papers one by one. Then he opened a smaller envelope that had been tucked inside the folder. It contained a printed email chain. The first email was from Evan to someone named Caleb Morris. The subject line read, Need the signing done fast. The second email was Caleb's response. I can bring the paperwork. Your grandmother needs to be calm and not ask too many questions. Once she signs, it moves. My chest tightened. Denise read the message over my shoulder. Who is Caleb Morris? She asked Evan. Evan said nothing. Who is he? I asked. Finally, he whispered. A guy I know. Was he going to pretend to be a notary? He wasn't pretending. The notary seal on the power of attorney belonged to a retired notary, Denise said. And the lender says the closing was scheduled for tomorrow. Evan pressed both hands against his forehead. I was desperate. What did you owe? Melissa asked. He looked at her. At first, I thought he would lie again. Then something inside him seemed to collapse. 38,000, he said. Melissa stared at him. How? Sports betting. Credit cards. Then I borrowed from people I shouldn't have borrowed from. My heart hurt. But it did not soften the truth. You could have told us. I said. You would have judged me. We would have been afraid for you. Melissa said. That is different. I needed one payment to reset everything. With my house? I was going to pay it back. With what? He had no answer. That was the part of the plan he had never built. He had prepared forged documents. He had hidden my mail. He had lied to neighbors. He had created a future where I was supposedly unable to speak for myself. But he had never created a real way to repay the debt. He had only counted on taking more time. More access. More control. Denise asked Evan for the P. Oh. Box key. My mail. Any copies of my identification. And every document connected to the application. He handed over the key. Then he went upstairs and returned with a shoebox. Inside were photocopies of my driver's license, my insurance card, my social security card, and old bank statements I had believed were safely stored in my desk. I felt sick when I saw them, not because they were just papers, because they were pieces of my life, pieces I had protected for decades, pieces he had taken while living under my roof. Detective Bell placed the shoebox into an evidence bag. Mr. Clark, he said. You should not delete anything from your phone, computer, email, or cloud accounts. You may wish to speak with an attorney. Evan looked at me. Grandma, please. It was the first time he sounded like my grandson again. And that was the most painful moment of all. I wanted to tell him I loved him. I wanted to tell him there was still a way back from this. But I also knew that words without consequences would only teach him that fear could be erased if he looked sorry enough. I do love you, I said. But you cannot live here? He began to cry. I have nowhere to go. You had a home? I said softly. You chose to make it unsafe for me. He left that afternoon with 2 duffel bags, a box of clothes, and his mother's silent help carrying things to his car. He did not take the television stand, the furniture, or any of the small comforts he had brought into my house over 6 months. He took only what was truly his. The rest of it suddenly looked like clutter, like evidence of how gradually a person can take up space in your life until they believe they own the room. The next weeks moved slowly. The lender formally denied and closed the loan application after its fraud team reviewed the records. The county accepted my affidavit. And Denise helped me place additional protections around my property record and personal information. The post office confirmed the forwarding request had been canceled. Detective Bell told me the investigation would continue. He could not promise an outcome, and neither could Denise. There were interviews, digital records, the false notary stamp, the email chain, and questions about Caleb Morris. The process was not instant. Justice rarely is. But the truth no longer depended on whether Evan admitted it. It existed in the documents, in the call records, in the hidden mail, in the forged power of attorney, in the number he had written beside the value of my home. My house was never used as collateral. No money was funded. No lien was recorded. And no one moved me into assisted living. But the damage was still real. There were nights I stood in my kitchen and felt anger rise so suddenly I had to grip the counter. There were mornings I reached for my mail and remembered that Evan had been opening it. There were times I heard a car outside and felt my body tense before I could remind myself that I was safe. Melissa began coming over every Sunday. At first, she came with apologies. Then she came with actions. She helped me replace locks. Not because I could not do it myself, but because she wanted to be present while I did it. We changed passwords together. She drove with me to the bank when I needed to update my accounts. She listened when I talked about William and the fear I had carried since his death. One Sunday, she said, I keep wishing I could undo it. You can't, I told her. I know. But you can decide who you are after it? She nodded. That was the beginning of our repair. Not forgiveness with no memory. Not pretending. Repair. Evan sent me a letter 2 months later. It came through his attorney. The letter said he was sorry. It said he had entered counseling for gambling addiction. It said he understood he had violated my trust and that he would comply with the conditions of the investigation and any future legal requirements. I read it 3 times. Then I placed it in the blue folder with William's note. I did not call Evan. I did not invite him back. I wrote one reply through Denise. I told him I hoped he got honest help. I told him I wanted him alive, healthy, and accountable. I told him that if he ever wanted a relationship with me again, it would begin with truth over time, not promises in a letter. And I told him he would never again have access to my home, mail, finance, or personnel documents. That was not revenge. That was a boundary. The first warm day of spring, I planted tomatoes in the raised beds behind the house. The maple tree was beginning to bud. William's old garden gloves were still hanging from a hook in the garage. I put them on, though they were too large for my hands. Melissa sat in one of the folding chairs, drinking iced tea, while I pressed seedlings into the dark soil. You know, she said, Dad would be proud of you." I smiled without looking up. He would have been mad first. She laughed through her tears. "Yes," she said. "He would have." Then she grew quiet. "And after that?" I placed one last tomato plant into the ground. "After that?" I said. "He would have reminded me that this house was ours because we protected it." The new front door locks gleamed in the afternoon sun. I still carried my key in my purse. Not because I was afraid someone would change the locks again, but because every time I felt it there, I remembered something I had nearly forgotten. A home is not just walls and a deed. It is the right to walk through your own door without asking permission. It is the right to open your own mail, make your own decisions, and be treated as a full human being, no matter your age. And it is the right to say no, even to someone you love. If Rebecca's story reminded you that dignity deserves protection, please like this video, subscribe to Truth and Dignity Stories, and share it with someone who needs that reminder. In the comments, tell me, can trust ever be rebuilt after a family member tries to take control of your home?